all those implemented. To very quickly finish, I would say that a lot of opportunities of partnerships as we are complementary, but also we had this experience of ruralification. In 15 years, we managed to increase from 25% of the ruralification rate to 95% of today people having access to electricity. It's also a matter of policy, it's a matter of program, not only by the utility, but also with different partners, the regions, and that's how we managed to reach this amount. So today we are very glad that this opportunity to show that how we can share our knowledge together and knowing what's going on in especially how to bring electricity to the population can be one of solutions of more inclusive development. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Please, could you put your hands together for the speaker? Okay, let's go to the next speaker.
Presentation.
Okay, please, can the organizers get the presentation? He has a presentation he wants to use to guide his talk. Can we get the presentation up? What do you need?
We can see it. We have to step down.
Thank you. Okay. Can we get the presentation? Okay, that's it.
Thank you. So my name is Tarek Bourkoukou. I'm representing Mazen. I'm very proud and happy to be here. And thank you for the invitation. Thanks to the OCP Policy Center also for the invitation. So actually, I was here 9 years ago to work in the oil and gas. I worked in very important projects here, and I could see today the transition to the renewables, and I can say that I prefer the renewables personally. So I would advise to switch as soon as possible as much possible to renewables. Yes. So I'll talk about the context in order to see what are the complementarities. There. Okay, good. Okay, thanks. Okay, so just I will repeat a few things that Mr. Moulin said, but I think it's important. We have some figures here. In 2008, it was the peak of oil, and obviously we have no fossil fuels, so Morocco had to find a solution. At the highest level of the state, it was decided to go for renewables. And so you can see that, first of all, the consumption of Morocco is growing very fast. It's about 6.5% every year. So it almost doubles every 10 years. It's very important because of our ambitions in industry, in services, automotive industry, aviation, very, very consuming industries. This is very important. So you can see that the electricity mix is the part of renewables increases. We had virtually no solar in 2008, 2% of wind and hydro because of historical reasons, because Morocco went for dams and agriculture since the 60s. And you can see that in 2020, from this small percentage, it grows to 42%, including hydro, wind, and solar. And by 2030, considering that the basis is increasing considerably, we go to 52%. So this is very ambitious. Mazen was created in order to tackle these challenges. Actually, we have some ideas, some values in order to tackle these challenges. We obviously need to reach the targets that I said before, but in the same time, we need to provide industrial integration, local development, and research and development. Also, we are not the only acting partner. We have very important actors like ADR, universities and also the private and the public sector. What we do first is we find the best places, considering the study of the resources. We make a qualification of the sites to see what is the best site for the power plants. Then we structure the projects. You can see that we have very important partners here, the World Bank, the African Bank of Development, the Agence Française de Développement, etc. And we have a very complex structure in order to allocate the risks. This structure has been developed with the advisors, and basically the main reason is to provide visibility for the developers, to allocate the risks with a certain balance, and to get the lowest prices for the Mazen being a lender that takes the money from the banks and is lending to a developer. And Mazen also provides the lands and the infrastructures in order to give visibility to the developers. This is a picture of the site of Ouarzazate. It's 3,000 hectares. It's extremely, it's huge. And we had to make a design to choose the technologies that were for each area. So we chose here a thermal power plant, CSP, that allow us to store energy during the night. So this is very important because in Morocco we have a peak consumption hour that is at sunset, and we have some photovoltaic here. This is so we had to build all the infrastructures around the site in order to have the services. Just some pictures. This is the solar field. This is the area where we collect the energy from the sun in Ouarzazate, in Nor 1 and Nor 2. It's the same technology. So basically, there's an oil here going through that concentrates the heat of the sun, and that is directed in order to produce steam and turn a turbine. This is the power block. This is the area where we produce basically the energy. This is the tower. This is today it's the highest building in Africa, more than 240 meters, with temperatures up to 560 degrees of molten salts at the top. So it's very impressive. And this is a photovoltaic plant. We have 3 of them, one in Ouarzazate, one in Laayoune, one in Bouchtor. This is a picture of the wind. At the very beginning, Mazen was in charge of the solar, and gradually we are integrating the wind and the hydro in our responsibilities. Okay, so now let's talk about some complementarities that exist that are quite obvious actually between Morocco and Nigeria. First of all, we thought about the laws, the governance that needs to be put in place in order to develop renewables. So I guess that from the Nigerian side, there are other ideas, that's an exchange of ideas concerning the laws, how to distribute responsibilities between developers, producers, grid utility. There are a lot of exchanges that could be very helpful at the highest level. Then obviously there's the technical sharing of experience, of expertise, to assess together the resources, either in Nigeria or in Morocco, to choose the technologies. We have different histories here. Hydro is very important, so we can learn also from the Nigerian side and provide information. How to structure projects and think about it and get the bankability that is required to work with the main institutions, financial institutions, make business models, and build tendering, because in Morocco it worked. Today, only in solar we have 700 megawatts that are really working, and almost 1 gigawatt of wind. So it's something that is really working. The point number 9 is very important. It's co-funding, co-development of projects. Mazen is really willing to do this, either with local funds or with the Moroccan funds, either here or in Morocco. We'd like to work together to make projects with all the technologies that are available in renewables. Mr. Moulin talked about the creation of industry. Mazen created, actually, is a part of a cluster where we have all the important actors of solar today and then renewables to discuss, propose local packages. And we reached, for example, 35% of local value in the sites that I presented before. And of course, there are also some lessons learned because of these big projects, all the stakeholders, the issues we had to tackle, the challenges that essentially are common. So discussions could be very fruitful regarding the interfaces with producers, with the communities also, the administration, the permitting. And of course, this could allow to foster the commercial exchanges, either to have companies from Morocco working here or have Nigerian companies and investors work in Morocco. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation and the talk. So we'll move to the next speaker. To give us a brief on.
All right, thank you. Thanks to the last speaker. He's reeled out some areas of complementarities between Morocco and Nigeria. But I would just like to pick a few direct areas where I see that we have a few things in Nigeria to learn from Morocco, especially as regards renewable energy. The first area will be the question I had for Ben Akabuze before he left. And that is straight. Why subsidies? Why do we pay 2.4 billion naira per day to subsidize, petroleum products? Morocco removes all forms of subsidy as of year 2016, if I'm right. Except APG. All right. So at least, that also boosts the revenue that we're having issues with. And the second thing it does is that it makes renewable energy competitive. So if you are subsidizing, and which Nigeria is doing now, you are subsidizing petroleum products like diesel. So it's cheaper for a company to buy diesel generator and buy diesel and fire rather than doing renewables. So that's one area. And secondly also is the commitment of Morocco under the INDC is also very ambitious, and I think Nigeria needs to learn from it. Committing to almost 35% against business as usual. And no wonder the African COP, that is African Conference of Parties, held in Morocco, is clear. So we also need to, those are areas that we need to learn from in Nigeria. One third area also is the, in terms of renewable energy, how the pricing are determined. In Morocco, it's by competitive bidding. So the best price get the projects. In Nigeria, it's still not competitive yet, and that's why we're having issues with the 14 companies that had PPAs signed. If it were to be competitive, I will bid the price I know it will be commercially viable for me, and then the government gives me the license, and I go and set up my power plants. So it's also an area we expect that in subsequent projects under renewable energy, especially grid-tied, it should be by competitive bidding rather than signing of, agreeing and signing of PPAs with an embed, for example. All right. Also know that Morocco has an agency, the MASEN. The last speaker, has that. We need to also learn from how that was done, how the laws were passed. How do we have a specific agency for solar? India also did that many years ago when they had this Indian solar mission. That helped them a whole lot. So if Nigeria is serious about renewable energy, we need to be specific and have agencies around that. We also need to learn on how to promote standalone system. For example, solar water heating system. From my last estimate, over 300,000 solar water heaters, maybe at the last count. Maybe it's more than that now in Morocco. Solar water heating, water heating system is one of the appliances that consumes so much electricity. So if we're able to take this away from the grid, that also frees power for industrial companies to run on. Then also there's an initiative called the Desertec Initiative. Actually, a German collaboration, if I'm right, that is interested in supporting scaling of and harnessing of renewable energy anywhere in the world, right? So how did Morocco get into that initiative? We might need to learn from our friends in Morocco on how we can bring that in. I also noticed that the the commitment to energy mix by renewables is also very good. I mean, I think as at, it's estimated that by year 2030, we should have like 52% capacity. That's great. So those are things, that we need to, these are areas where we need to learn and see how we can implement that in Nigeria. There will be need to, I oversee, I'm part of the Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria. I would really be very interested to know and meet the project developers in Morocco, who most likely will also have an association of renewable energy project developers. I would like to meet and interact and see how we can engage ourselves in exchanges, technology transfers, knowledge, capacity building and the rest. That will really help a whole lot. One or two areas where I feel maybe Morocco might also want to probably learn about how Nigeria has done that. We understand we have one of the best mini-grid policy framework around Africa currently. There's some materials on the table for mini-grid investment opportunities. So it might be also, an area where we'll be willing to see how collaborations can happen. Long and short of it is we want to meet companies in renewable energy in Morocco. We want to see how we can, learn and have exchanges. We want to see how we can even encourage investments of companies in Morocco, even in Nigeria. We understand that having a competitive bidding process encourages international project developers to come into any economy, which we hope Nigeria will ultimately be able to do. I have my colleague and my friend here also, in the space of renewable energy, mostly grid-tied. I'll also allow him to speak a bit on the renewable energy angle. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning. Thanks, Shegun, for giving me some minutes to speak. Well, unapologetically, I'm a project developer. Over the past 18 years, I've been in the energy space. Started out at the Nigerian American Merchant Bank energy desk, where we were bridging cash calls, shortfalls for NNPC for the JV companies. Subsequently, I got involved in PPPs, and I remember working very closely with Madam Minister when she was the Minister of Education as the lead for the Unity Schools program. I got involved in renewable energy during privatization. The ESPRA, the Energy Reform Act, was put in place in 2005, which was to unbundle the sector and to get government's inefficiencies out of the power sector. It didn't get executed until 2012, when there was the creation of the regulator, the bulk trader, and creating a value chain where you have distribution companies, 11 of them, and you have generation companies, 6 of them, and a transmission company, which was still owned by the government. The others were all private sector owned, and the whole idea was to bring in private sector efficiency and funding into the sector. Now, this is 2018, and 5 years after privatization, some lessons have been learned. In that period, starting in 2012, we started out as the pioneers, project developers, trying to develop renewable energy projects in Nigeria. And when we started out, everybody referred to the street lights that were not working in their communities as the benchmark for renewable energy. And so it was a big hurdle to convince regulators, even though it was in the policy, and it was a regulation for feed-in tariffs for solar and wind and biomass and hydro. It was difficult to even convince the regulators to issue your license. Even though people talk about competitive bidding, it's very difficult for anybody, any major developer or investor to come into Nigeria where financing is not proven, risk allocation is not well defined, neither is EPC proven, right? So what we've been doing is to try and be the pioneers to develop standardized structures in which renewable energy projects can be done. So, like he said, I'm one of the 14, even though when we started, we were about only 3 or 4. And like I think the professor of LBS said, anytime you say there's a license or something to be given out, every man and his dog shows up and wants to participate in the process. But locally, Embed and Regulator licensed very competent 14 projects, mostly in the northern part, one in Enugu in the east. Our project is 100 megawatts. It's just down the road from Geregu 1 and 2, and on the transition line into the FCT. And it's a project that has IFC as an investor, and the reason IFC is there, similar to what has happened in Morocco, is to create opportunities and to make the market. What has happened in the past 6 years is a lot of knowledge has now been gained in trying to develop renewable energy projects. And right now, we've moved away from solar. We're in partnership with ONG to do solar in Kainji and Jeba, because during the dry season, the rains and the water levels come down. It affects the grid. So we're thinking we can put solar in there and create a synergy between hydro and solar. We're also working with the Lagos State government and EcoDisco to do offshore wind because of logistics. And it's interesting when you talk about oil and gas and renewable energy. In Norway, which has a fantastic oil and gas sector, it's NMPC, quote unquote, it's now called Equinor, formerly called Statoil, uses oil and gas experience in offshore to transit to become one of the biggest wind energy producers in the world, right? So there is opportunity to learn from Morocco, to learn from other oil-dependent countries on how we can create energy mix and energy security, and how we can internalize those jobs. On my site, I think in construction we create about 1,000 jobs. If you add that, multiply that for the 14, that's 14,000 jobs where jobs are difficult to find. In total, we're seeing EPC prices coming down. Our EPC price, even though we haven't built anything, just based on simulation and doing a tender, is less than $1 million per megawatt. And so we're hoping that once some of the 14, all of 14, can achieve financial close, then it will create a floodgate of investments that creates the competitiveness. And most importantly, something that you mentioned in your presentation is that, and the task force, we didn't really have a plan. So the government and World Bank have come up with a plan where I think $3 billion comes in to rectify the liquidity in the market. And also some governance milestones where, for instance, MBET should have a board, TCN should have a board. And then there's also the $350 million that comes into the mini-grids, which has to be approved by the World Bank. And I think there's supposed to be a tendering process for 250 sites in the next few months. And then there's, I think, $70 million for unsolicited mini-grids. The mini-grid regulation is something that we both worked on, funnily, even though I focus on on-grid. There's about 10 gigawatts of stranded power on the grid. There's only 4 gigawatts that is being transmitted on a day-to-day basis. And then self-generation at about 150 naira or 20 naira per kilowatt is about 20 gigawatts. That's the diesel generators and the petrol generators and the better past my neighbors that you see everywhere. But in Nigeria, most of the gas power plants are in the south because that's where the gas is. The hydro are in the middle part of the country because that's where River Niger, River Benue flows through. And then the thinking was that we'll put renewable energy, solar, and wind in the northern parts of the country. So that policy is in place. I think there's a 2020 where we're supposed to do, I think 2020-30. Yes, we're supposed to do 30% renewable energy. So there is some movement, but I think the key thing that we would take away from this discussion with Morocco is how we're able to leverage PPPs, how we're able to get the government comfortable with the right risk allocation structure to attract funding. And then obviously the third thing is something what I call local content, where you are able to government. And maybe the multilateral agencies are onto something by trying to get Moroccan companies to partner with the private sector here to drive energy security, energy diversity, and obviously to create energy access to the people and drive the right GDP and the right growth that we need to see in this country. Thank you.